From LA to Piscataway, you've come to the right place to talk all things Big Ten. Welcome to Big Ten Ted Live.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome into Big Ten Ted Live. The regular season has concluded, which means it's championship week, and we are going to be taking a look at two conference championships. It's probably the only time, let's just say one of the few times, who knows where expansion is going to take us in the future. It is going to be one of the few times that we could look at two conference championships on this channel, because of course we got Michigan taking on Iowa in the Big Ten Championship in Indianapolis, the final East versus West version of this title game. And then you got two future Big Ten members going at it out west in Las Vegas, in which is essentially a college football playoff quarterfinal. You've got the Washington Huskies taking on the Oregon Ducks. They had a Game of the Year candidate earlier this season, back right smack dab in the middle of the year on October 14th, and it's going to be another great battle, you would think, between the Ducks and the Huskies in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium. That is going to be on Friday night. So here's kind of what we got coming up on the channel. So we got a Friday night championship game and a Saturday night championship game that I'll have my eyes on. We're going to have a live reaction show on Friday night after the game, and then we're going to have a live reaction show on Saturday after the game with kind of some more in-depth analysis from both the games out west and then here in the Midwest in the state of Indiana. So we've got two championship previews here tonight, but there's a lot more happening inside the world of college football. In the Big Ten, Tom Allen is hitting the bricks. He was fired after 7 years as head coach of the Indiana Hoosiers. Going to briefly talk about that here at the end of the show tonight. If it is your first time stopping by Big Ten Ted and Big Ten Ted Live, hitting the subscribe button lets you be notified of live shows, uploaded content, things like that coming out in the future. All Big Ten, all year long, right here on this channel. You're going to want to stick around. You're going to want to be here for this content. If you are a Big Ten fan, if you're a Ducks fan, if you're a Huskies fan, if you're a Trojans fan, if you're a Bruins fan, it's a one-stop shop for all 18 schools within this conference. Also, if you want to kind of take your investment in the channel one step further, consider being a member of the Big Ten Ted's Champions Club. Click that join button below for details on that. Special perks kind of come along with that membership as well. So consider that to support these shows and this channel as it continues to grow. Thank you it's been a great year. It's been the highest viewed of the 3 years that I've been doing this on YouTube. And you got to think with 4 more schools, got a great Ducks and Trojans fan base. UCLA and Washington has seen some of those kind of sprinkle in as well. It's a great time to be a member. It's a great time to be in the Big Ten. It's a great time to be a member of the conference. And then it's a great time as well for all of us out here kind of covering this thing. We got some transfer madness kind of going on in college football as well. I want to briefly touch on that. But before I do, I want to cover a couple of different points. We're going to cover the Big Ten championship game first, and then we're going to cover the game out west in the Pac-12 championship game. I think it's a really fun weekend in store. Out of the 10 years, right, since 2014, the same year the college football playoff started is the same year the Big Ten expanded to 14 teams with the additions of Rutgers and Maryland. I think it's going to be a really fun championship weekend. There's a lot on the line. Oregon and Washington, that's a play-in game to get into the 14 playoff. Texas is in the hunt. Ohio State, believe it or not, they're going to be scoreboard watching. There's a chance that they could back into the playoff once again. Georgia and Alabama, I believe, is going to be an extremely competitive SEC championship game. Of course, you got the Big Ten. People are going to have their eyes on that. Is Michigan going to utterly dominate, or are they going to get a little bit of pushback from the Iowa Hawkeyes? I think there's a lot of fun to be had this weekend on conference championship weekend. And then Florida State. What happens with them against the Jeff Brom-led Louisville Cardinals that have gone 10-2. Can Louisville spoil Florida State's bid to get into the playoff? If Florida State's undefeated, even if they haven't had Jordan Travis, even if they haven't looked the best after his injury, where do the Noles stand? I think that's a very interesting question. If they go undefeated, you got to think you've got to put them in there. You can't leave an undefeated Florida State champs of the ACC. Even though the ACC has been a weak league, I'm not sure if you can keep them out at this point, but that's something that's for the committee to decide. That's not for me to decide. I'm kind of glad I'm all of that. Lots of scenarios as it pertains to the college football playoff. And in this final year of the 4-team iteration of this playoff, I believe that we're going to have maybe the most competitive, right? These semifinal games have not been very competitive, really, throughout this 10-year history. There's been a few here and there that have been really good, but a lot of times these semifinals end up in blowouts. I think this year you get Georgia, you get Michigan, even if Ohio State gets in there, Texas gets in there, Oregon or Washington get in there. I think there's a lot of unpredictability, I think, in this year's 4-team college football playoff. Let's talk about transfer madness, because that really started today when I was at work. I kind of prepped this show last night talking about these 2 championship games, talking about Tom Allen a little bit, but we are kind of in that really crossover silly season right now where everybody's focused on the postseason. Everybody's focused on the playoff. They start preparing for their bowl games. The regular season is over, but you start to see kids enter the transfer portal. Here are some notable names of players from Big Ten programs that have entered the portal. I put out a video about the new hiring of Jonathan Smith at Michigan State. And then a day later, his top 2 quarterbacks at MSU enter the portal, Katin Houser and Sam Levitt. So I said in my video, which is, I guess that part of it now is obsolete, they got to answer some questions at the quarterback position. They got to answer some questions. Is it going to be Houser? Is it going to be Levitt? Or are they going to go into the portal like Jonathan Smith did at Oregon State when he grabbed DJ Uiagalelei? Right now, I know some of those guys could withdraw, but right now it appears as though Michigan State, Jonathan Smith, they're going to have to go into the portal to be able to find their next quarterback. So Katin Houser and Sam Levitt are in the transfer portal. O.C. Brothers, the linebacker at Purdue. How about Donovan McCulley, the wide receiver at Indiana? Really came on as maybe the top target for the Hoosiers this season. You put him into a good offense, you get him with a good quarterback, I think he could really break out next season and be a really good, maybe like a 1,000-yard wide receiver. How about Spencer Petras? The last time Iowa and Michigan got together in a Big Ten title game, he was the quarterback for the Iowa Hawkeyes. He's got a year left of eligibility, so hopefully he latches on somewhere. He's kind of been in a coaching role because of the injury and everything at Iowa this season. So hopefully he latches on somewhere and really has a great last year of college football. And then 2 Purdue wide receivers, Mershawn Rice and TJ Sheffield. You got 3 guys in there from Purdue, O.C. Brothers, Rice, and Sheffield, that say, we gave it the college try. We gave it a try in the year 1 under Ryan Walters. And then they're going off to greener pastures, right? That's kind of what that's telling me right now. So where are the Boilermakers going to go from here? What steps forward do they take as a college football program? That's going to be very interesting to see Ryan Walters. He's done a good job in recruiting. What can he do to flip this thing and improve off of that 4-8 season that they just completed, off-season mode for everybody in Purdue Boilermaker country? We got Nathan Campbell checking in here tonight as well, talking about the Houston job, kind of outside the Big Ten. I talked about Gary Patterson on Twitter. Gary Patterson back in the Big 12. Seems like that could be something. Rich Rodriguez is maybe a name that wants to get back into the swing of things. Matt kind of chiming in Indiana or Syracuse. Once we talk about Tom Allen at the end of the show, we'll talk about maybe some potential candidates to take over in Bloomington, Indiana. And Hawkeye Howard checking in here tonight. Iowa and Michigan he is hoping for a close game. A close game. Remember the last two times these two teams met together, it was 42-3 at the end with the Wolverines clinching the Big Ten title. And then one more question here from Chris. Who do you think would be the worst matchup for Michigan in the college football playoff? I assume right here you're talking about the semifinals right out of the gate. For me, it's the Oregon Ducks. And we're going to be talking about the Oregon Ducks during this show. Right, Oregon they play a lot like Michigan, and you could argue that they are more explosive than the Michigan Wolverines. You can argue that they are better on the actually, I might say it. I might kind of change my mind, switch things up right as we're going. This is a live stream. This is what it's all about, right? Oregon, you look at Bo Nix, better than J.J. McCarthy. The run game, probably you lean towards the Michigan Wolverines, but that Oregon team, I've said it multiple times when talking about these West Coast teams coming over to the Big Ten. Oregon is built for the Big Ten. They've got one of the best offensive lines in college football. They're a top 10 rush defense in the country. That's a team. And it seems like that's the way things are headed, right? Where you would get Georgia is number one, and then you'd have a Texas or an FSU, something like that, or an Ohio State at number 4, and it's leaning towards the Big Ten champion against the Pac-12 champion in a semifinal. Put that baby in the Rose Bowl. That's a nice bow on this long era of college football, seeing those two conference champions once again go at it in that game. When is the last time? That's a great trivia question, something I might look up a little bit later. But when is the last time a Big Ten champion and a Pac-12 champion met each other in the Rose Bowl game? If you know that answer, go look it up, put it in the comments. I'm very curious to know, of course, since this 14 playoff, and even going back to the BCS, where the Rose Bowl was the title game every 4 years, it hasn't happened a lot since 1998, that traditional matchup that happened every single year in the late afternoon in Pasadena. For many years that happened. So we'll see what happens in the future. But right now, I think Oregon is that matchup right now for Michigan. Right, I think Michigan matches up well against Washington, even though Washington will test Michigan's secondary. I think the Wolverines have proven that they have got some good players back there in the secondary. But man, when I look at that matchup with Oregon, that could be a game of the year. That's a classic Rose Bowl type of game where who knows where that one could go. It could be a lot of fun between the Ducks and the Wolverines if that's the way things end up in the end. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to Big Ten Ted Live here tonight on a special Monday night edition of the show. It's time to talk about the Big Ten championship game. Michigan is the clear favorite on paper. You look at all of the position groups, you look at the units throughout the Hawkeyes and the Wolverines, I think it's fairly clear that Michigan is the better team. Okay, you look at their offense, especially quarterback better, running back better, offensive line better, wide receiver better, tight end better. I don't think that's much of a discussion right there. Defense, of course, that's Iowa's better unit, but Michigan's got a pretty darn good defense as well, one of the top defenses in college football. And then you factor in Jim Harbaugh returning to the University of Michigan sideline as well. A lot of things are going in the direction of the University of Michigan, especially after that big win over the Ohio State Buckeyes this past Saturday. But we're going to break this one down, believe it or not. A lot of people are just throwing it out there. Michigan's going to win and maybe not spending a lot of time talking about the football game. I'm going to talk about this football game. Let's talk about it first from the Iowa Hawkeyes point of view. Aggressive. Iowa needs to come out aggressive on the defensive side of the football. They need to bring pressure. They need to overload the box for a couple of different reasons. I think Iowa needs to focus in on bottling up this run game. We talk about Nick Jackson. We talk about Jay Higgins as two of the top tacklers in the Big Ten Conference. But when I really talk about aggressiveness, I'm talking attack J.J. McCarthy. Try to force a turnover. Try to get Michigan in uncomfortable situations early. Because if this Michigan machine gets humming early, that boa constrictor is going to tighten really early, and they might be out of breath by something like the second quarter or something. So if Iowa can get a turnover early in this football game, if they can get a short field for their offense, maybe get a field goal, who knows, maybe even a touchdown on the board first, that at least gives Iowa some momentum early in this football game. If Iowa comes out in the first 5 minutes, 7 minutes, and it's a 10-point deficit, hell, if it's even 7-0, that's a really difficult spot for this Iowa Hawkeyes team to be in from the outside. You got to generate a pass rush, but I think that is a steep challenge. Look at how Michigan protected J.J. McCarthy through that entire Ohio State game. Ohio State, even though Iowa has some good players up front, Ohio State has more talented pass rushers. And Michigan pass protected J.J. really well against a very good Ohio State pass rush. For Iowa to generate that pass rush, for Iowa to get in there and wreak havoc, considering what we saw last week, I think it's going to be difficult for them to do that, but you can't let JJ stand upright and throw the football down the field. I've been saying it all year long. Michigan can beat you any way they choose to beat you. Iowa, you load up on the run game, JJ's going to throw the football over the top. We'll see how some of these man-on-man matches, I assume we're going to see a lot of one-on-one matchups over the top. Of course, no Cooper DeJean. That really hurts Iowa in this game where maybe they want to come up a little bit and then you have to try to cover over the top. I don't think you're going to be able to do that for an entire length of a football game. It's tough to go up against Michigan for 60 minutes. Some teams have gone with them for 30 or 40 or 45, but the entire 60 minutes is extremely difficult when you play a team as strong and when you play a team as deep as the Michigan Wolverines. I think JJ could have a pretty good game throwing the ball because I think Iowa's going to come up to the line of scrimmage. That Michigan run game has been really good. It's where you get back to classic Michigan these last 3 weeks where Sharon Moore has been the acting head coach. Is JJ going to have a better day throwing the ball if Iowa kind of comes up and plays the run a little bit more? I think that could possibly happen. Let's shift gears a little bit to the University of Michigan right now. This is a challenge for Michigan. Believe it or not, I know a lot of people are saying the difference in this game is huge, but let's talk about Michigan for a minute. Everybody in the beginning of the season, everybody out there was talking about how weak this Michigan schedule was. And it is correct. It was not a good schedule right off the bat. And they were putting it on some teams very early in this slate. But November 11th ticked around. And since then, they've been facing off against some of the Big Ten's best defenses, and they faced off against one of the Big Ten's best defenses. No matter which side of the fence you stand on, I think you have to say that this Iowa defense, at the very least, will present some challenges for Michigan. Okay, Michigan could overcome those challenges and look really good, but considering that these two teams haven't played, I think there will be some challenges for the Hawkeyes. So let's talk about Michigan late in the season, how they fared against some of these really good defenses. I mentioned that Veterans Day game against Penn State. The top rushing defense in the country. They rushed for 227 yards, 3 scores, and J.J. McCarthy didn't throw the ball late in that game. Check. They played pretty well throughout that one. 338 yards of total offense against one of the other top defenses, not only in the Big Ten, but in all of college football, in the Ohio State Buckeyes. 338 yards of total offense. Ohio State usually gives up on average around 260, so they played pretty well, putting the ball in the end zone and moving the ball against the Buckeyes of Ohio State. Iowa, talent-wise, might not have Ohio State talent. They might not have Penn State talent, but folks, as a unit, Phil Parker always puts forth a really good defense. And this will be the third really good defense that Michigan will have faced in the past 4 weeks, in theory, going into the college football playoff. There's something to be said about them being prepared going into that type of environment and that type of situation in that playoff when they have faced off against some of the best defenses, not only in this conference, but you could say in all of college football. You look at some of these playoff teams, Georgia, like they're Georgia, they always got talent, but this is not that 2021 team that steamrolled Michigan in the semifinals. Okay, you look at some Oregon, they have a really good rush defense, their pass defense kind of trails behind just a little bit. Washington, right? That's not a great defense. You look at teams like a Texas or a Florida State. The Big Ten Conference, you can say what you want about the Big Ten. They've had really good defense, and Michigan has faced off against some of these premier defenses down the stretch. I think there's a chance early in this game that Iowa could prevent some confusion, possibly for Michigan. It wouldn't surprise me to see the Hawkeyes kind of push back early in this game, and then that kind of puts the pressure on the Iowa offense to be able to do something on this Michigan defense, and I think that's where things maybe fall short just a little bit for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Let's talk more about this Iowa offense. Caleb Brown, that's a big name. Okay, he was a 4-star Ohio State transfer. Everybody was excited for him. And then I'm saying in the middle of the season, where's Caleb Brown? We haven't seen Caleb Brown. He was really getting into the offense, trying to get into the weeds a little bit and really get acclimated. And it kind of took him a while to get to that point. And these past few games leading up to the injury against Nebraska, which I'll talk about here in just a minute, he became the target that this Iowa pass game wanted to get to. It wasn't Nico Ragaini, even though Addison Ostrenga has really stepped out as of late. It was Caleb Brown. I think we all knew from the outset of the season that Caleb Brown, once he kind of got into the swing of things, he's got so much talent. He was going to be the guy that was going to be that playmaker within this Hawkeye offense, and they need Caleb Brown. So he goes out in the Nebraska game. The two deep depth chart comes out, and he's listed as a starter at one of these positions for this Michigan game. So if he is healthy, that's a big advantage. I think you got to get him the football, move him around the formation kind of things. Maybe you get it to him. They tried some run stuff with him. Just get the ball into the hands of Caleb Brown. I think he provides something that is lacking at the University of Iowa and has been lacking for a while. And now that they have that, they want to take advantage of that big time right now for the Iowa Hawkeyes. This is a Michigan defense that's 6th in the country in rush defense. It's hard for me to imagine Iowa getting a big time push up front. Even though their backs they got 3 pretty good backs with Caleb Johnson, with Jazz Patterson, with LeSean Williams in there. But Michigan is just really good, and they're really deep on the defensive line. I think they're always fresh. That is such a big deal of the depth of a football team, and I think Michigan has some really great depth right now, and I think that really helps them, especially on the defensive line, to be able to stay fresh. When other teams get into the third quarter, they get into the fourth quarter, they start to wear down a little bit. Michigan stays fresh, and the talent, that helps out just a little bit as well. When I really look at this thing from 10,000 feet, it reminds me a lot of 2021, right? A lot of people ride Michigan going into that game. Iowa's got a good defense. Iowa doesn't have a good offense. I'm trying to be nice here. I'm trying to be really nice here. That game was 14-3 at half. I could see it kind of playing out a similar way where because Michigan hasn't got on the field looks, they did not play Iowa earlier this season. I could maybe see things. They got to kind of get in the swing of things against this Phil Parker defense. I could see Iowa maybe pushing back a little bit to start, but like I said, playing a 60-minute game against the Michigan Wolverines is extremely difficult, folks. It's extremely difficult. Okay, I think Iowa could maybe hang around for a little bit, and it all goes back to that aggressiveness I said at the top of this preview, is getting Michigan into uncomfortable situations early, maybe forcing a turnover, things like that. But I think like that eventually the dam seems like it's going to break. That's the way I see it. In 2021, it started off 14-3. It ended up 42-3. Last thing I want to talk about in terms of the preview of this Big Ten title game, I feel like we're being cheated a little bit. There was a big storyline coming into this season. Cade McNamara won the Big Ten title at quarterback for the Michigan Wolverines in 2021. He ends up transferring to Iowa. Beginning of the year, this was a lot of people's pick for the Big Ten title. Michigan against Iowa, and we had that storyline, that revenge factor of Cade McNamara going up against his former team, against J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback that kind of took his job over there at Michigan. That's a really great storyline. Obviously, Cade's going to be there. Obviously, he's going to be supporting his team and Deacon Hill and the rest of that Hawkeye offense and that Hawkeye team. But I just feel like we were cheated a little bit of having that possible rematch scenario with Cade McNamara going up against his former team in the Michigan Wolverines. I think this could be a solid game to start. I think Iowa could present some different challenges for Michigan, but in the end, I think the Wolverines will show just how good of a football team they are. In the end, Iowa just doesn't have the complete team, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that Michigan does in this football game. And I think that's why Michigan builds momentum and takes some confidence into the college football playoff. All right, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it here a little bit more. Let's head to some comments as well. Hawkeye Howard kind of bringing up a solid point right now. If I was in the game going into the fourth quarter, right, 10 points-ish, Iowa's got a chance they win close games. That's something that I kind of saw this week as well, this is an Iowa team that just knows how to win a game. They know how to win a one-possession game. Okay, when you look at the negative side, like Nebraska doesn't know how to win a one-possession game, Iowa just knows that they have to make the play. They stay disciplined, and they stare the other team in the eye and says, you're going to make a mistake. We're going to do everything right. We're going to have all of our T's crossed. We're going to have all of our I's dotted, and we're going to be good. It's you that's going to make a mistake. And that's kind of what happens down the stretch in some of these Iowa Hawkeye football games. It's fun to watch. It's fun to see. But yeah, if it's close, Iowa needs to put the pressure on Michigan. That's why I said they need to be aggressive early. Okay, Michigan is so good when they're playing from a lead. Michigan is so good when they're playing from a position of power. That's the thing with Michigan. Same thing for Iowa, right? They need to be kind of playing with a lead. This is not a team, definitely, that's built to come from behind. So that's why they need to be aggressive and maybe force some things kind of early in this matchup. Resident Hawkeye fan Erica Goldberg checking in. No respect for our team. A lot of people, and don't get me wrong, I'll count myself as one of those people. A lot of people siding with Michigan, coming off the big win against Ohio State a couple of weeks ago. They beat a good Penn State team that ended up 10-2 this season. They're riding a lot of momentum right now. You get Jim Harbaugh back off of the suspension, and now you're facing an Iowa. I'm just very curious to see how Michigan's offense faces off against that Hawkeye defense. Hawkeyes need to wreak havoc early in this matchup. Erica chiming in. Yep, as Caleb is going to play on Saturday, barring another injury. We've had our fair shares of injuries already. A lot of teams in the Big Ten West, a lot of teams have been bitten by the injury bug. You look at Wisconsin, even though they got Tanner Mordecai back, they got Braylon Allen back as well. They've been bit. Nebraska has really been bit bad as well. At times, Minnesota has been bit as well. It's been an injury-riddled year with some of these Big Ten teams, with some of these Big Ten West programs as well. Josh Bazin checking in. Not an Iowa fan, not a Michigan fan, but Michigan's going to blow up the Hawkeyes like Penn State did earlier this season. A little bit of a different atmosphere. You got a neutral site in Indianapolis versus a whiteout atmosphere at Penn State, and the weather didn't do anybody any favors as far as the Iowa Hawkeyes are concerned as well. So I think this one maybe could be better than some people think out there. Will it be 42-3 like a couple of years ago? I don't know. Of course, another key to this game, Brian Ferentz, when Deacon Hill has been successful these past handful of games, I talked about him turning it around when I previewed the Nebraska game. You got to get him that confidence early in the pass game. Look, I know you're going to want to run the football. I get it. Michigan's got a really good secondary. Michigan's got great pass rushers. I understand, but you need to get that confidence up early. I think for Deacon Hill to be able to you got to have some balance, okay? Because if you end up being, hey, we're going to try to run the football to a victory, Michigan's going to load up on it and say, beat us with the pass. So they're probably going to do that anyway, but yeah, need to be balanced in this one. Kind of get Deacon Hill's confidence up a little bit early in this game. Chris, it would be nice if Michigan could get Will Johnson back before the game, but regardless, I'm not worried about this game at all. Michigan's got a good secondary. Like they've got a very deep secondary. I think they've got one of the country's best secondaries. You look at guys like Rod Moore. You look at Mikey Sainristil, who's one of my favorite players in college football. The story of him, a wide receiver transitioning to defensive backs. He just makes plays. He gets the ball back for this offense when Michigan absolutely needs it. He's going to be a big time factor in this football game as well. It's going to be a really fun game, folks. It's going to be a really fun game between the Michigan Wolverines and the Iowa Hawkeyes. Josh Bazin can see the future because we're going to be talking about this here in just a little bit. Oregon and Washington is going to be phenomenal. Pac-12 championship game on Friday. I'm looking forward to these two arriving in the Big Ten, which forced programs like my Nittany Lions to open it up a little bit more. I've always said this, when you take the traditional 14 in the Big Ten, you combine them with the West Coast 4, teams got to meet in the middle. West Coast teams got to get better on defense, tougher in the trenches. Oregon's got to figure it out. Okay, Oregon might be the exception to the rule, but can UCLA put together another good defense? Right, they got to figure some things out on offense as well. Washington, all right, you look at them as well. I think teams got to meet in the middle. Teams in the Big Ten need to get better on offense. Teams out west maybe need to get beefier and better on defense. That kind of. I always thought they need to meet in the middle. It's not just a one-sided thing. Well, the West Coast teams need to start looking like Big Ten teams, or the Big Ten teams need to start pitching it around the yard. Right? It's not that simple. It's a little bit more gray than it is black and white as it pertains to the future of this conference. But it is going to be a great game. I'm going to be talking about that here in just a little bit and previewing that matchup. I got my eye on this one. Oregon's a team that can win a national title. Oregon's a complete team. And I said this before earlier in the show, that when it comes down to a competitive game, right, out of the teams that you could see, a matchup that you could see with Michigan, Michigan could provide maybe some of the most pushback when it comes to a matchup like that with this Michigan versus Oregon, right? Who could play Michigan? Oregon could provide them that challenge, right? Michigan was all in. This is their last dance, and everything that's happened off the field, okay, I think that adds more to this is our really last opportunity. And then with some good programs and a more difficult conference schedule coming up, this is our opportunity to win a national championship. It might get stripped from us later on, right? That might happen. But at least for now, they want to try to go out and win a national championship. It's Big Ten Ted Live here on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in here this evening. It's a great time. It's a very interesting time of year with these bowl matchups, with everything with the playoff, recruiting, right? Early signing day is coming up in the middle of December. That's always a big step. Coaching changes, right? You're seeing that now. You're seeing it happen earlier because the early signing day is earlier. The first transfer portal window is earlier. So a lot of teams, like we saw, Michigan State and our beloved Big Ten make the move. You saw Mike Elko at Texas A&M introduced. You got to make that move right away. Lincoln Riley made that decision right away when he moved from Oklahoma to USC. Gone are the days when if you're a candidate for a head coaching job where you can sit and think about it for a week. That's not happening anymore. It's to put it bluntly, it's crap or get off the pot, right? If you don't want to come here, you could be the best. You could be Nick Saban. You could be Kirby Smart. You could be a great coach. But we need someone in place at the end of the regular season who can install what they want to do, bring in a coaching staff by the time the early signing day and that early transfer portal window really open. That's a big key. When you want to turn around your college football program, and you can turn around teams faster than you ever could right now. If you want to do that, you got to make that move early. Michigan State has done it. Texas A&M has done it. Some of these other schools, maybe not as quick right now. So we'll see if they can get this job done and turn this thing around at other places throughout the country. Excited for these teams, excited for Oregon, excited for Washington, excited for everything that's to come. More from Josh. Dependent on how Georgia looks against Alabama will depend on how Michigan comes back in the college football playoff. Look at Georgia and Bama, right? Those two teams facing off in the SEC title game. That's essentially a quarterfinal game, right, to get into the playoff. If Bama wins, they're in. I look at this, boy, what happens when you have a one-loss Alabama and you have a one-loss Texas? And they win and beat Oklahoma State. Texas and Bama played each other earlier this year. Texas got the win. But Bama just beat Georgia. It's tough. It's tough. There's some chaos scenarios out there. Florida State wins. Texas wins. Georgia wins. Michigan wins. It's going to be some tough decisions to be made. Man. It's going to be... That's why I'm so excited about this conference championship weekend. I'm so excited about Friday and Saturday because I believe so much could happen. Chaos could ensue. What a way to send out this era of college of college football as well. Josh, chime in. Alabama, according to Josh, shouldn't get in ahead of Texas because of head-to-head. Should not get in. Boy, you got to compare the resume, right? The qualifications or the language is we want the four best teams. Sometimes it's the 4 most deserving teams. That Alabama and Texas, that's a heck of an argument. Texas lost to Oklahoma. Who has better wins? Maybe later on in the show when I finish all of my segments here, we could look at that. Because what Alabama does, what Texas does, affects what happens in this conference. Affects what happens with that team. Can Ohio State back into the college football playoff? There is a path. There is a path for the Buckeyes to get into that number 4 seed yet again. To see Georgia and Ohio State for the second consecutive season. If it happens, can Ohio State flip what happened last season? The other semifinal, Georgia's likely to be the number 1 seed if they win. Okay, and then the semifinals this year are the Sugar Bowl and the Rose Bowl. Sugar Bowl Georgia will likely pick that to stay nice and close. Of course, the Big Ten, Michigan would want to play in the Rose Bowl. Of course, that their traditional spot over there that the Big Ten and Pac-12 had for many, many years. Gerald chiming in. Gerald, thanks for tuning in. Have to go with a head-to-head on Texas over Alabama. Texas over Bama. Going to be conference mates next season. Also from Jared, a little late. No worries. No worries. You're here. You're here. Notification never came through. Make sure you click the bell. That kind of allows you to stay notified. It's usually next to subscribe. If you're subscribed already, there should just be a little bell, and then there's a drop-down menu where you can see that as well, just for you and for other viewers out there that want to get notified when these things happen. Also from Gerald. Needs help. Here's the scenario. As long as we're talking about it, I'll kind of uncover my scenario. All right. Georgia's got to win. Georgia's got to beat Bama. Because if Bama wins, Georgia would probably still be in the top 4. So Georgia's got to win. So that's number 1. Florida State got to lose. Louisville has to beat Florida State. Louisville can't get in as a 1 loss because they don't have 1 loss. They're a 2-loss team. They're not getting it. Texas, that's where things get interesting. Because the AP poll and the coaches poll dropped Ohio State, but Ohio State remained ahead of Texas. Watch tomorrow night. Watch Tuesday night and see where the committee puts Texas. If the committee puts Ohio State above Texas, that could provide a path, even if the Horns beat Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship. That could provide a path for the Ohio State Buckeyes to get in. If the committee right now believes, and then you play Oklahoma State, I don't think that's a win that all of a sudden would vault you. Remember Ohio State, they beat a 10-2 Penn State. They beat Notre Dame. I don't know if that Notre Dame victory, I mean, it's a solid victory. I don't think it's a whoa on the resume, but at the very least, it is a solid spot for them. But anyway, getting back to this Ohio State thing. Florida State's got to lose. Georgia's got to win against Alabama. It doesn't matter what happens in the pack because the winner is getting in there anyway. So without Florida State, without Alabama, who would be at 2 losses, it comes down then, essentially, say Texas wins, to Ohio State and the Texas Longhorns. Who gets in at that point? You got a Big 12 conference champion, and then on the other side, you've got this other team that lost by 6 points, that they were within the 35-yard line of possibly winning on the road in Ann Arbor. So close. I can't wait to see what the committee does if that happens, and the explanation by Boo Corrigan and the College Football Playoff Committee. Either way, whether Texas gets in or whether Ohio State gets in. To me, if they're looking to not have pitchforks at their door, I think they put Texas in. Hey, Ohio State, you had your shot. You came up short. You're not a conference champ. Conference championships is something that they put emphasis in. Something that they put emphasis in. We got some Oregon fans checking in. Excited to have you guys in the league next year. Oregon will have a phenomenal blowout against Washington. We're going to preview that game momentarily. Oregon by more than 2 touchdowns. Will it be as close as it was last season? That's the big question. That's the big question. Oregon's been one of the most impressive teams down the stretch in college football. A couple of comments here from Josh that I want to get to. Penn State, he's saying Penn State will either go to the Peach Fiesta or Cotton. They are certainly going to a New Year's Six bowl. They're certainly going to a New Year's Six game. We'll see if they can win another one of these games. But folks, Penn State fans, a lot of teams would love to go 11-2 in back-to-back years. I know you want to beat Michigan. I know you want to beat Ohio State. Next year's a different story. Michigan's not on the schedule. Drew Aller's going to have a year under his belt. Singleton, Allen, Carter on defense. They're all going to be back. I've said it before on this channel. I thought Penn State was possibly the team of 2024. And it could end up being that way. Could end up being that way. Josh also chiming in and say Iowa will go to the Citrus Bowl. I could see them, Iowa going to the Citrus, the ReliaQuest, one of those types of bowl games on New Year's Day, kind of earlier in the day. That would not surprise me as well. Let's see what else we got going on as well. Ducks fan checking in once again. Sick of Washington saying we will not be in the Pac-12 championship game. Well, you're in it. You're in it. Now who's in it to win it? It all comes down to one game. 9-0 in the Pac-12 Washington against 8-1 Oregon. Gerald chiming in, really wants Michigan to face Florida State. That's a favorable matchup, right? We talk about games not being as competitive in the semifinals. That's one that could not be competitive, right? Look at how Florida State has been without Jordan Travis. It hasn't been great. So that's definitely a favorable matchup for the Michigan Wolverines next year. Boy, once this season really wraps up, once we get into mid-January, we get some transfer portal stuff, we're really going to start looking at 2024. We're really going to start breaking down what next season is going to look like once we get into January, signing days in the books, some transfer stuff is in the books. Once we get into February, those types of months, we're really going to start breaking things down because that's when things are a reality. Right now, USC's a member of the Big Ten through my eyes. Okay, they just got a bowl game left. UCLA is a member of the Big Ten in my eyes. Oregon and Washington, not yet. They got the Pac-12 title game. But after that, you start to get them in a Big Ten mode. This guy right here, we're going to have to do something with this. We're going to have a ceremony for this guy, especially this division. Rest in peace, Big Ten West. All right, time to transition, and it's time to talk some West Coast football. Time to talk about our beloved Ducks and our beloved Huskies. Let's dive into it a little bit. Boy, it's going to be a good game. Man, this is going to be a ultra-competitive football game here between the Washington Huskies and the Oregon Ducks. Who's playing better than Oregon right now? Not a lot of people right now are playing better than the Oregon Ducks. All right, let's dive into it. Let's preview this matchup. You rewind back to October 14th. Before Michigan and Ohio State played a tremendous game, this was the game of the year. The Oregon Ducks went to Seattle and played an instant classic against the Washington Huskies. It was Washington on the winning end of the stick that week, but now you have a neutral site game with everything on the line. The rematch between the Oregon Ducks and the Washington Huskies at a neutral site in Las Vegas. In the final Pac-12 game that we're going to see, the Pac-12 championship game. Now, that was a fantastic game. It was an awesome game. But since then, there's a story to be told. But since then, there is a second half story to be told with these two ball clubs. Down the stretch, I don't know if anybody is playing better than the Oregon Ducks. Oregon is a complete team. Oregon is a great team. Oregon is a team that can win a national championship. I firmly believe that. They've got a Heisman Trophy contender at quarterback. If I'm a Heisman voter, I'm checking the box for Bo Nix. That's where I'm at right now. I think the second half of this season that he's had, I think has put him above Michael Penix. And yeah, let's put him above Jalen Daniels. Let's give him the Heisman Trophy. That's where I'm at right now with Bo Nix. But as a team, Oregon has been much more impressive the back half of the season, and the Huskies and the Ducks have some pretty common opponents, and Oregon has fared better against those opponents than the Washington Huskies. Oregon's margin of victory the back half of the season, 25.5 points per game, whereas Washington has won games by an average margin of 6.5 points per game. You look at the Washington Huskies, 1 week off of that huge win. They got a struggle game against a not good Arizona State team. It's been a really deep Pac-12 this season. Arizona State, right? They're towards the bottom. But a 15-7 win 1 week after that big win against Oregon. Stanford ended up being a 3-win team. And remember, Stanford needed a huge comeback to become a 3-win team to beat Colorado. Remember that if Colorado had any semblance of a football team, that'd be a 2-win team. Washington gave up 33 points to the Cardinal, a 42-33 win over the Stanford Cardinal. You look at late in the season, Oregon State, I know it was weather, I know it was on the road, I know Oregon State is a decent team, but that was a 2-point close win for the Washington Huskies. And then the Apple Cup against Washington State, needing a walk-off field goal at home to defeat their rival in the Cougars. This Washington team has not been overly impressive, but, and there's always a but there's something to be said of going 9-0 in the extremely deep Pac-12 conference this year. There's something to be said winning close games. Maybe you don't play your best, but you find a way to win late in a football game. I think where the microcosm of both of these teams in the back half of the season can be told through their quarterbacks. Bo Nix in the final 6 games of the year has thrown for over 2,100 yards, 20 touchdowns and just 1 interception since that loss to Washington. Michael Penix Jr. has thrown for just under 1,600 yards, 12 touchdowns, and has turned the football over 5 times in the year, 5 interceptions since that game against the Oregon Ducks. So go the quarterbacks, so go these teams. And quarterback play could determine what happens within this college football game as well. The last thing I want to touch on in really comparing these teams, let's talk about the common opponents. They both played Utah. Oregon went on the road to Rice Eccles, tough place to play. They blew them out 35-6. Washington at home, 35-28, 1-possession game. Washington State, both of these teams got the Cougs at home. Oregon beat them by 14. Washington walked off with a field goal. Oregon State, I understand the weather there, but Oregon dominated them 31-7, a 2-point win for the Huskies. USC, Oregon, 36-27 at home. But that Washington team, USC was moving the ball up and down the field against that Washington defense. I can talk about these stats. I can talk about these comparisons until I'm blue in the face, but it's the eye test for me. When I watch these two teams play, I see the complete team that Oregon is. Washington is really good at throwing the ball up and down the field. We know what Washington's strength is. There's multiple strengths on this Oregon football team. Something about Michael Penix down the stretch just hasn't clicked. Not sure what it is, but Michael Penix just doesn't seem to be the same quarterback that he was early in the season. All right, let's talk about this football game because it's going to be a fantastic college football game. I believe Oregon has an advantage if they can Big Ten this game up. Oregon has one of the very best offensive lines in college football. You're going to be a Big Ten member, Oregon? Let's play like it. Dominate the line of scrimmage. And this is crazy because they got a Heisman Trophy quarterback, but dominate the line of scrimmage and run the ball. Bucky Irving, Jordan James, they've got really good talent in the backfield. You go back to that Washington game. I thought some of their best parts to that Washington game, their best segments, their best series of plays, things like that, was the run game when Oregon kind of got that going at times. Oregon rushed for 204 yards, 5.1 yards per carry in that Washington game. This is a very balanced Oregon football team. if they can limit the possessions of Washington, dominate the time of possession up front, it puts more pressure on Washington to take advantage of those possessions. You limit the amount of possessions that Washington has, that's a win to me for Oregon. Establish the line of scrimmage right away. Bo Nix can throw. Okay, you're always going to have the threat of Bo Nix throwing the ball down the field, the guys like Troy Franklin and Tez Johnson and others. But I think the real edge for the Oregon Ducks could be running the football and really being great at the point of attack in this game. And then you look at Washington's defense, I think there's an advantage there up front for Oregon if they can establish that physicality right away in this game. Let's talk about it from the Washington point of view. Let's rewind once again to that game in Seattle on October 14th. Washington got going early. Their offense, specifically Michael Penix, and their passing offense was clicking early. And that opened up some run lanes later that allowed them to be a little bit more balanced. Washington, get your playmakers in space. You've got a fantastic, one of the best wide receiving groups in all of college football. Take advantage of it. Whether it be the short passing game, medium, long, whatever route concepts you want to do, get this passing game going early. This is not a Washington team that can line up at the line of scrimmage like probably Oregon, and that can run the football and run the football and run the football. Nor do they want to. They know what their strength is. Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb, they know that throwing the ball down the field with Michael Penix is what can win them a Pac-12 title, is what can get them into the playoff, and then who knows what happens from there. You need to get your playmakers in space. You need to make it a track meet. Now, Oregon can play in a track meet. Oregon can score with some of the best teams in college football. But Washington, you need to score. You need to make a few stops like that USC game, right? That was a back and forth. Nobody could stop anybody. But Washington made a few stops down the stretch. 52-42 was the final score against the Trojans. That's the type of game. You need to get that offense in rhythm. You look at some of these games since that Oregon game. Not a lot of times. You could throw, the USC game is one of them, but there's been some games where this offense hasn't been quite the same. It hasn't been quite in rhythm. This is a game where you need to get that rhythm back. This is a game where you need to throw and throw and throw. Maybe soften up that defense, and that's where some Dylan Johnson run lanes could possibly open up, and then you can get more balanced throughout this game as well. Because Oregon's got the 7th-ranked rush defense in the country. They're really good at that. Oregon's really good up front. Oregon was able to get some pressure on Michael Penix earlier this season when they played back in Seattle. And Oregon needs to hit Michael Penix on defense. You can't allow him to sit there. You can't allow him to get in a rhythm and move the ball up and down the field, and that opens up the whole offense, which I just touched on as well. We know it's going to be a great game. Look, I know Washington hasn't looked great as of late, but in a one-game scenario, let's see if Washington can possibly get it together and get some rhythm and momentum going on down the field. One more thing about Oregon. There's a lot of great receivers at Washington. We talk about Marvin Harrison Jr., a lot of great receivers in college football. I think one guy that's not talked about as much and should be talked about more is Troy Franklin. Troy Franklin, very underrated. 3rd in the country in receiving yards. He's 1st among Pac-12 wide receivers in receiving yards. That includes Rome Odunze. That includes some of the other good receivers out there out west in the Pac-12. Very underrated, very good. Of course, you got Tez Johnson in there as well. Washington fans, I just think Oregon's a more complete team. That's just the way I see it right now. I think they're better up front. I think they're better in the run game. There could be a path for Washington to win if they can make this game fast and get up and down the field and make a couple of stops in this football game. That's their path to victory. I can't imagine them bucking up and running the football. Okay, that's not a scenario that plays out in my head. I can see Oregon doing it because I believe they're more balanced, and I believe the Ducks are more of a complete team. But no matter what happens, I think it's still going to be a great football game. Even though Oregon has been playing better down the stretch than Washington, I think you're going to get up for this game, and you're going to get both teams' best shot, and the winner clinches a spot in the college football playoff. Can't wait for this one. Can't wait for this one. It's going to be fun. That's going to be a fun Friday night. I'll be having a live reaction show on Friday night following the conclusion of the Oregon Ducks and the Washington Huskies. Let's get to some comments. Oh, Ducks fan 1. Can't wait to be a part of your show. I appreciate that. Appreciate the comment. Appreciate the support over there. I'm excited. I've received a warm reaction, warm welcome, so to speak, from the Oregon fans. Had Doug Scott from the QB11 show earlier this offseason to talk about how Oregon could kind of translate. Listen to the QB11 show a lot to kind of get my mind into the Oregon sphere, so to speak, as we kind of get closer to them being a part of this conference. So really feel really good about what's coming with the Ducks. Sunshine Design, our resident Northwestern Wildcats fan, the 7-5 Northwestern Wildcats, mind you, they're going to go to a bowl game. Man, they could be 8-5. 8-5 at the end of this one. Amazing. Oregon is rolling. Oh, Ducks fan 1 got some comments from him. First one here. Washington is a one-year wonder. After this year, they'll be back on earth. I think Washington is going to be if we still have Ryan Grubb, which he could become a head coach somewhere. If we still have Kalen DeBoer as the head coach, okay, if we still have that, I think this could be a destination for a top transfer quarterback. I think Oregon's going to be a top transfer quarterback destination as well. But if you keep this staff intact, even just a little bit, I think a lot of people look at what's happened the last couple of years with Michael Penix at Washington, and they see, I can elevate my game. I can take my game to that level. So the wide receivers, you got to replace those. Where does Washington fit in the future of the Big Ten? That's a great question. I think them and UCLA are I think we know Oregon and Washington are going to be pretty good. Oregon and USC, right? We know how well they recruit. They've got good coaches. USC got to figure it out on defense, and the Trojans are going to figure it out on the defensive side of the ball. You got to think, because you can't get much worse. But UCLA and Washington, where are those teams going to end up on a consistent basis? It's going to be fun to find out. Gerald McKinley kind of seeing things. He's not right. Michael Penix just doesn't look the same. Since 1994, Oregon has been rolling. I think we covered that. You'd have to go back into the channel and see my conversation with Doug Scott. There was an investment in the program. Mike Bellotti was the head coach at the time. Of course, the Phil Knight partnership really took them to another level. But before that, Oregon was just a Pac-10 program, right? But they've certainly been taken to another level. Their uniforms, their brand has really grown, and now they're a Big Ten program. Oh, Ducks fan 1, if Washington played Utah at Rice-Eccles, they would have lost. We'll never know. Utah. I've been to Utah. I've been to Salt Lake City. Been to the University of Utah campus. Salt Lake City is a beautiful area. It's one of the best environments in college football. Oh, Ducks fan 1, Washington. They're aware. It's in Vegas, neutral field. That's why their fans have been awfully quiet. Both fans got to go from the Pacific Northwest down to Las Vegas. Very interested to see what the fan contingency is going to be for both Washington and Oregon. You got to think the atmosphere is going to be rocking down there. One more here from Ducks fan 1. Washington mediocre outside of Husky Stadium. Boy, when Husky Stadium is rocking, we saw that back on October 14th. When Husky Stadium is rocking, it is really rocking, and that's why they call it the greatest setting in college football. Great to have Washington back in this conference. Gerald McKinley chiming in. Personally, I feel Franklin, this is Troy, not James. I feel Franklin makes Nix, that's kind of a tongue twister, look better than he really is. They've got some good pass catchers down the field. Troy Franklin, Tez Johnson. That's always something. That's always a talking point. Do the receivers make the quarterback look good? Does the quarterback make the receivers look good? That's always an interesting discussion. More from Gerald. So many programs that could use a transfer quarterback. Schools/NIL are going to have to pay up for quality. And we're going to talk about NIL a little bit towards the end of the program when we talk about Indiana and Tom Allen being fired over there as well. Boy, that's going to be a great game. Ducks, Huskies with everything on the line. Everybody knows about their offense. Everybody knows about them going up and down the field. Maybe there's a different X factor. Maybe it's the kicking game. Maybe it's the special teams. Dan Lanning has done a great job transforming this into a program that can be very successful in the Big Ten Conference. I'm just going to throw this out there. If you disagree, let me know in the chat. Let's throw Jim Harbaugh out. Okay, off the field stuff. Let's call a spade a spade. He ain't probably going to be in Ann Arbor next year. He's probably going to try to find an NFL job. Okay, we'll see. Let's just, for this discussion, we'll put Jim Harbaugh off to the side. Who's the next best coach entering in the Big Ten? The 17 remaining coaches. Who's the best? Who's the best? Look at the flag behind me. I can't get my directions right. Look at the flag behind me for reference of the current programs in our conference. Is it James Franklin? Is it Ryan Day? Is it Kirk Ferentz? Or is it Dan Lanning? There's an argument I believe to be made that Dan Lanning is the second best head coach behind Harbaugh. And if Harbaugh's not there, then Lanning would be number one. There's an argument that in a post-Harbaugh world that Dan Lanning is the best coach in the Big Ten Conference. What he's done in 2 seasons at Oregon, he coordinated a fantastic, Michigan fans know all about this, that 2021 Georgia defense. Okay, coming over as the defensive coordinator from Georgia, be the head coach at Oregon. What he's done in 2 years to shape Oregon football in his identity has been fantastic. And he is recruiting. Right now, Oregon is the number 2 class in the Big Ten, 2024 rankings right now. Number 6 in the country. They've put together a couple of back-to-back top 10 classes. They are recruiting with the best of the best in college football right now. Oregon's going to be a problem. I don't know about USC. In theory, they should figure it out. In theory. Washington, UCLA, we know Chip Kelly hasn't recruited the best for the Bruins outside of Dante Moore. Oregon could be that team that could pose a problem. We'll see if they can kind of replace some of the players that will be leaving. Let's get to some more comments. Josh chiming in. The Big Ten championship game will be out in Vegas at one point. That was rumored. Haven't really heard much lately. Here's the way I see it. I think we're going to get a rotate, and the networks are going to rotate, so why won't the location rotate? In West Coast schools, you kind of want to get it into different footprints. I'm just going to throw out some stadiums for you that could be in the rotation. SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. US Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. Ford Field in Detroit. Chicago is set to build a new indoor stadium. I lost count on my fingers how many that is, but I could see a rotation on the networks of who's broadcasting the Big Ten championship game and also where this championship game is being played. I could very well see that happening. And then if eventually down the road we get Big Ten semifinals, there's plenty of venues to be able to host those types of games as well. And Josh chiming in with what I've been saying here for a little bit. Oregon fits the Big Ten right now in their transition from the Pac-12. Very interested. USC is a tough schedule. Like I looked at USC's, and maybe we can take a peek at that here in just a little bit. But you look at USC's schedule, 6-6 and 7-5 is on the table. They went 7-5 this season. What happens when they play LSU out of conference along with their out of conference game against Notre Dame, when they play Michigan, when they play some of these other teams as well? Very interested to see what happens over there. If it is your first time coming by the channel, it's your first time coming by Big Ten Ted, and Big Ten Ted Live. Don't forget to hit subscribe and the notification bell next to it so you know when we are going live. First of all, hit that. Second of all, make sure you tune in Friday night after Oregon and Washington. Going to have a live reaction show here as well. So make sure you tune in for that. Saturday night as well, following the Michigan Wolverines and the Iowa Hawkeyes. So we're going to be having some live shows. And of course, I'll post my reactions to those games. And then we start gearing up for the college football playoff. And then we start gearing up for bowl season. And you know there's going to be a lot more transfer news kind of coming down the pike as well. Josh chiming in thinking Jim Harbaugh is going to the Bears. Raiders have an opening as well. It's going to be because the NFL season ends early January, which, just so perfectly lines up with when Michigan is, even if they make it to the Big Ten championship game. National championship game, and they make it to that point, I could very well see something happening right after that where Jim Harbaugh makes the move to the NFL. That seems to time out pretty well in there. So sometime in January, maybe that could happen. It just seems right. It just seems with everything going on off the field, it just seems like this is the time. I said this before the season. I said, McCarthy's coming back, Corum's coming back, Zach Zinter. Oh, man, I hope he gets better soon. That was a gruesome injury. Guys like that, they're coming back this season. Let's do it one more time. Last dance. Let's go win a title. Let's do what we haven't been able to do. We'll see if Michigan can accomplish that goal here. All right, I'm gonna quickly talk about the Tom Allen situation at Indiana. Tom Allen was fired as Indiana head coach earlier this week. Here's the thing about Indiana. That's a tough job. That is a tough place. Like when you talk about the toughest jobs to win at in the Big Ten, Northwestern, even though David Braun did the miraculous turnaround this season, that still could be the most difficult job in the Big Ten to turn around. The most difficult job, considering the academic requirements and just everything on campus, that's tough. Indiana, that is a basketball heaven. They love their hoops in Bloomington and really the entire state. Indiana's a tough job. Look at the flag behind me. Okay? Look at some of these other schools out there. A lot of them, that's the school in the state. Okay, and football is the biggest thing in those respective states. Indiana invests a lot into basketball. Tom Allen said in his departing words, I hope Indiana invests into their football program, invests into NIL. That is a big concern right now for the folks in Bloomington, Indiana. That's a big concern. Let's kind of rewind and take a look at the career of Tom Allen at IU. He went 33-49 in 7 seasons as well. His peak was in 19 and 20. Right before college football changed with transfer portal and NIL type of stuff. Big Ten Coach of the Year during that COVID-shortened 2020 season. But it's what has happened since then in the changing world of college football. Just 9 wins since 2021. Just 3 Big Ten wins in the last 3 seasons. But here's the thing about Indiana. I thought they were competitive down the stretch. They lost their final 3 games by a combined 10 points. A combined 10 points. Close game down the stretch. What happens if they flip 2 of those? This is a 5-7 team, and Tom Allen's still in Bloomington. I firmly believe that. You see a lot of guys. Brendan Sorsby has entered the portal. You've seen Donovan McCulley enter the transfer portal. I think you're going to see a lot more Indiana Hoosiers enter this transfer portal as things kind of go down the pike just a little bit. Let's talk about who could replace Tom Allen at Indiana. Sean Lewis, the offensive coordinator at Colorado. I could see him making a move. Of course, he was a former head coach at Kent State before going to CU. I could see Jason Candle, the current head coach at Toledo. How about Paul Chryst? Former Wisconsin head coach, has got Big Ten ties. You go to a place where there's maybe not a ton of expectations to maybe ease back into being a head coach. I could see Paul Chryst doing that. What about Jake Dickert over at Washington State? Like Oregon State, that's a program that doesn't have a conference. They don't have much of a future right now. Do you leave and go into a conference that has a future? Even though it might not be a great job in Indiana, do you go there? Do you make that happen, knowing that there's going to be an influx of TV money, an influx of revenue within the athletic department? Do you make that move? I think that's a big question here right now. Sunshine Design asking, where does Tom go? I think he could be a big sought-after defensive coordinator. I've heard some USC people that say, hey, if things don't work out with Jim Leonhard and possibly luring him to the West Coast, what about Tom Allen as the DC? It was announced Dave Aranda is coming back to Baylor, so he's off the market as well. So that's a possibility with Tom Allen possibly going out west to maybe be the defensive coordinator at USC. That's just a shot in the dark. I have no information on that, but I could see him possibly fitting in to be a DC at some point as well. Gavin Estes chiming in. Well, he's got an opinion. Huskies are going duck hunting on Friday night. Gavin, it's going to be a great matchup. Just previewed that Pac-12 championship matchup. It's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a fun matchup in Las Vegas. I think it's going to be a great contest. It's going to be a great contest over there. Washington has done a fantastic job. Going 9-0 in this conference, going 12-0 overall. You can't take that away. What Washington has done the last two seasons with Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer last year was kind of floated out as to maybe it's some of these head coaching jobs. Now that Washington is a Big Ten program, a Power 2 program with an influx of cash, I know Washington's coming in at a partial share, but because of where they are now, I think this is a job that Kalen DeBoer stays at for a while. That's what I believe about Washington. The key for them is how do they replenish and replace this talent that's going to depart Seattle this year? They're a team that's probably going heavy into portal. The recruiting has been below average in the Big Ten and then in the Pac-12. So Washington, they seem like a team that's going to be heavy portal to try to replenish some of that talent in their first year in the Big Ten Conference. Sunshine Design saying, hoping that Tom Allen stays within the Big Ten. He's got Midwestern roots. He's from Indiana. I could see him possibly ending up somewhere. We'll see. And maybe he kind of steps down a little bit to an analyst type of role, a position coach like you see some of these coaches kind of do after they get the pink slip. Josh Bazin, a comment here. Rusty on Friday night. Josh will be in attendance. He's going to be the Big Ten TED correspondent there in Indianapolis. I couldn't make it work. Did not apply for a credential for that one. Got a lot going on here now. A lot more busy this time of year than I thought I would be originally. But going to the Big Ten Championship in Indianapolis. Got to come back with a report during our next live show, Josh, to let us know what the experience like, what the fan split was. Michigan and Iowa, what the experience was around Indianapolis. Love to make it to a Big Ten championship. Been to the Big Ten basketball media days the last couple of weeks. Couldn't go to football media days this last week. Was going on a vacation in Canada at that time. So hopefully can make it to Indianapolis at some point for media days. That's something that I'd love to do to get more of that content on the channel from media days going forward. Beginning of the show, we talked about transfer portal. We talked about some scenarios with the college football playoff and some other teams that could be out there making some dents. Texas versus Ohio State. How do those resumes compare? I think that's something that's going to be talked about a lot as we kind of get closer. Can the Buckeyes back their way in to the college football playoff? I think that's going to be something that's going to be talked about as well. I'm going to pull up the Ohio State schedule right now if I can find it here. Got to find the Buckeyes schedule for this season, and then we'll kind of dive into it a little bit. There it is. There's our schedule. We kind of look at that game at Notre Dame. Is that the game that can put them over the top? And while I'm kind of doing this, I'm also going to pull up later. We'll get back to this in just a little bit. I'm going to pull up the Texas schedule. So you got that Notre Dame game on the road, 17-14 win over the Irish. Not sure if that is the non-conference win that the Buckeyes were hoping that it would be. Let me put it that way. You beat Penn State at home. You lost to Michigan, so your wins are against Penn State and your wins are against Notre Dame. Those are your big wins, and of course your good loss, so to speak, is a loss against the Michigan Wolverines. Now let's go to the Big 12, and now let's pull up the schedule for the University of Texas. How do they compare with wins? Alabama, on the road, great win. Alabama's been playing much better here down the stretch. They lost to Oklahoma, so I would say Ohio State has a little bit of a better loss overtime against Kansas State, a 3-point game against TCU. Look, it's not their fault that their schedule kind of shaped up this way. But now when I look at it, K-State, that's a team, and of course ads pop up. That's an 8-4 football team. I would say Notre Dame is a better win than the Kansas State Wildcats right now. Then you look across, so now you're comparing the Alabama win. Is that enough to get Texas into the college football playoff over the Ohio State Buckeyes? It very well may be enough to get them into that college football playoff. Josh chiming in more. He's attended every Big Ten championship game minus 2020. That's a lot of that goes back to leaders and legends, folks. Leaders and legends. Leaders and legends. Josh chiming in. Tom Allen would benefit from Tom Allen's defensive mindset in the Big Ten over at USC. Gonna miss Tom Allen being a head coach. He's a character, right? We love to have characters in the sport. We love to have characters in this business. It draws us in just a little bit. So yeah, I think we're gonna miss Tom Allen. We're gonna miss Tom Allen just a little bit here in this conference. But he put together some good seasons. He's fairly young. He's in his 50s still, so he can. Who knows? Maybe he might latch on at a G5 school, or like you said, we might be a coordinator, an analyst, position coach, something like that. So I could very well see him kind of going in that direction, and then we'll see what happens out from there. So we've got 2 championship games this weekend. Big Ten Championship, Pac-12 Championship. I'm going to have live shows after each of those championship games on Friday night and on Saturday night. The regular season has ended, and off we go. So I'm going to wrap this thing up. Last message I want to have for everybody out there. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Ring the bell to stay notified for videos, for live streams, and stuff like that. Quickly, I want to get to our guy Hummus Hero as well. Didn't really think about the Texas versus Ohio State resume. I was thinking Texas needs to lose, but maybe Bama just needs to lose to devalue the win, because then it's a 2-loss team. That would be Alabama's losses come against Georgia, against Texas. That's going to be a discussion. Okay, that's going to be a big-time discussion. If Florida State wins, I don't think you can keep them out. I don't think you can keep the Noles out of the discussion. Even though they're down Jordan Travis, I just don't think you can keep them out for that reason. I think you got to, I think this could come down to Texas. It could come down to Ohio State. If the Buckeyes get into this tournament, if the Buckeyes get into the playoff, I could very well see that being a team that could be dangerous. Ohio State, if they match up against Georgia again in the semifinals, I think this is a Buckeye team that could go head-to-head with Georgia and could beat them. Like the best thing for the Big Ten right now, Michigan and Oregon in the semifinal, Ohio State, we get an all Big Ten. Hey, even if Oregon beats Michigan, that's a future member. That's kind of the best case scenario right now for the Big Ten in the college football playoff. It's really going to be fun to watch to see if that indeed happens. I can't wait for this Saturday. I can't wait for these games. If you haven't already, hit subscribe, ring the bell. Also, if you want kind of extra perks, as beyond subscribing, consider becoming a member of the Big Ten TED Champions Club. It helps this channel grow and allows me to invest more resources into this channel by hitting that join button below. You can get all the details over there. Thanks everybody for tuning in to Big Ten TED live tonight. It's going to be a fun weekend, and it is going to be a very fun finish to this college football season on the field and on this channel. Until we meet again, until we see each other in the next video and the next live stream, I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next one.